My children sat there like they were frozen, not with grief but with rage. For the first time in months, they were finally in the same room with me, and all they could see was the money they had lost. But this story doesn't begin here, in this sterile law office in Munich. It begins in a hospital bed, with the silence of a phone that never rang. Yes, I left my entire fortune of 28 million euros, the company my late husband Klaus and I built, our house in Grunwald, everything, to the nurse who held my hand. Before you judge me, you need to understand what it feels like to be invisible to the people who should see you the most. If you've ever felt that, even for a moment, write it in the comments, because that feeling was the beginning of everything. Let me start at the beginning. I'm Petra Müller, 65 years old, and until a year ago I thought I had lived the perfect life. Klaus and I started our little catering company in 1985 in a tiny kitchen in Schwabing. We worked 16 hours a day, first serving small offices, then weddings, then corporate events. Over the years, our small business grew into one of the most successful catering services in all of Bavaria. Our children, Mark and Chloe, grew up among pots and pans. Mark is now 42. A successful attorney at a Munich firm, married to a doctor named Sabine. Chloe is 35, works in advertising, lives in a chic loft in Maxvorstadt. We sent both to the best schools, supported their dreams, forgave their mistakes. I thought we were a close family. Klaus died 3 years ago of a heart attack, suddenly without warning. The children were there, helped me take over the company, cried at the funeral. Back then, I still thought that death had brought us closer together. How wrong I was. After Klaus's death, I threw myself into work. The company was my only anchor, my only connection to him. But at 65, it became more exhausting. I noticed how the long days gnawed at me, how my body grew more tired. The children visited less, called less. "Mom, we're so busy," they always said. "The firm is slammed," or "This campaign is eating me alive." Then came March 15th, 2024. I'll never forget that day. I was planning a menu for a big wedding when a stabbing pain shot through my chest. It was like someone clamping my heart in a vice. My assistant Anna found me unconscious on the floor of my office. The ambulance took me to Klinikum rechts der Isar. When I woke up, the first thing I saw was the white hospital room and the tubes coming out of my body. Heart attack, the doctor said. Not life-threatening, but serious enough for several weeks of treatment. The first thing I did was ask Anna to call Mark and Chloe. "Mom's in the hospital," Anna later told me she had said to them. "Heart attack. She needs you now." The replies that came should have warned me. Mark sent a brief message. "Damn, that's badly timed. We're in the middle of a major case. Tell Mom I'll try to come by on the weekend." Chloe was even shorter. "Oh God. But this week is impossible. Client presentation? Send her my love." I lay in that cold, sterile room and waited. Hours stretched like chewing gum. Other patients had constant visitors, husbands, children, grandchildren, friends. My room stayed empty. The only sounds were the monotone beeping of the machines and the ticking of the clock on the wall. On the third day, she came. Sarah Hoffman. 28 years old, a nurse with the kindest brown eyes I had ever seen. She wasn't my assigned caregiver, but she came anyway. At first I thought it was just politeness, part of her job. But Sarah was different. "How are you today, Mrs. Müller?" she asked every morning, and there was real concern in her voice. She stopped and listened when I answered. She brought not only the medications, but also fresh flowers from the hospital garden. "The tulips are already blooming," she said one day, setting a small bouquet on my nightstand. "Spring is early this year." In the first week, Mark sent a text. "How are you, Mom? The case will wrap this week, then I'll come by." No second message came. Chloe sent an emoji every other day, a heart, a laughing face, sometimes a teddy bear. As if that were enough, Sarah, by contrast, came every evening after her shift. She sat on the chair beside my bed and told me about her day. How hard it could be sometimes, how grateful she was for every patient who recovered. She told me about her little brother Tim, who was studying medicine in Regensburg and made her so proud. "He's going to be a great doctor," she always said, eyes shining. After 10 days, 10 long, lonely days, Mark finally called. Not to ask how I was, but to explain why he couldn't come. "Mom, this case is huge. It's about millions. I can't get away right now. You understand, right? You were a businesswoman too." Businesswoman. As if that were all I had ever been, Chloe called the same day. "Mom, I'm so sorry. But you know what happened? We won the Mercedes account. That's huge for me. The presentation is next week, and if it goes south, you know how cutthroat the industry is." Both talked about me as if I were a business appointment that could be postponed. As if my heart, which had almost failed, mattered less than their careers. Sarah was there when I cried after those calls. She said nothing, asked no questions. She simply took my hand and held it. Her hand was warm and dry, strong and comforting. In that moment, for the first time since Klaus's death, I didn't feel alone. "You know," I said to her in the second week, "my children are very busy people. Very successful." I tried to justify their absence, maybe to myself. Sarah smiled sadly. "Success means different things to different people, Mrs. Muller. For some it's money or prestige. For others, it's being there when you're needed." Those words stayed with me. Being there when you're needed. When had my children last done that? The answer came in the 3rd week of my hospital stay. It was a Thursday. I remember clearly because "Who Wants to Be a Millionaire" was on TV. Sarah sat with me, and we guessed along with the questions. Suddenly the door opened, and Mark was standing there. 3 weeks. It had taken 3 weeks for my own son to manage to visit me. He wore his expensive suit, kept glancing at his Rolex, and his first word was not, "How are you?" but, "Sorry, I can't stay long." "Mom, you look good," he said, and kissed me quickly on the cheek. Better than I expected. "The doctors say you're going home next week?" I nodded. Sarah stood to give us privacy, but Mark barely noticed her. He was already on his phone, muttering about an important call. "Mark," I said, "could you maybe stay a minute? We haven't seen each other in so long." He sighed, as if I were a difficult client. "Of course, Mom. But you know Sabine is waiting in the car. We have season tickets at the theater tonight." Season tickets. While I lay here in the hospital not knowing if my heart would make it to the next day, my son was going to the theater. He had brought a bag. "Anna said you needed a few things from home." He set it on the chair where Sarah had just been sitting. "I tried to pack what you wanted, but honestly, I had no idea what women need in the hospital." After 20 minutes, he was gone again. 20 minutes of his valuable life for his mother who had nearly died. When he left, I opened the bag. On top lay my old bathrobe underneath a few nightgowns. But at the very bottom, between my toiletry bag and a few magazines, I found something that made my blood run cold. A folder. A thick brown folder labeled "Real Estate Appraisal Muller, Confidential." My heart started racing again, but this time not from fear, from fury. I opened the folder with trembling hands. The first page was a professional appraisal of our family home in Grunwald, the house where Klaus and I had lived for over 30 years, where Mark and Chloe had grown up. Current market value, 4.2 million euros. The next pages were worse, brochures. Glossy brochures from retirement homes. Residence on Lake Starnberg, luxury living in old age. Villa Sunshine, care with heart. And the last, highlighted with a marker. Care Center Alpenblick, specialized unit for dementia and Alzheimer's. On the last page, I found handwritten notes in Mark's messy script. Cell Grunwald, approx 4.2 meter. Care facility approx. 8,000 month. Remaining money into trust? Check tax advantages. They had already planned everything. While I lay here fighting for my life, they had already decided to put me in a home and sell my house. I was no longer a person to them, but a problem to be solved, an asset to be managed. The worst was the last note. Discuss with Chloe. Mom must not find out until everything is settled. They wanted to do it secretly. Present me with a fait accompli. I sat in that hospital bed, holding that folder, and felt something fundamentally change inside me. The grief over their absence turned into cold, clear anger. The disappointment turned into resolve. Sarah came back at that moment. She saw immediately that something was wrong. Mrs. Miller, are you unwell? Should I call the doctor? I shook my head. Sarah, may I ask you something? Of course. What is family to you? She sat back down on the chair and thought. Family, she finally said, are the people who are there when it counts. Not the ones who claim they would be if they could. The ones who simply are. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. The next morning I called my old lawyer, Mr. Schneider. He had prepared Klaus's will and had known our family for years. Mr. Schneider, I said, I need to change my will immediately, fundamentally. He was surprised. Petra, are you sure? That's a big step. Maybe you should first... I've never been more sure, I cut him off. Can you come to the hospital today? He came in the afternoon, a small, kind man with glasses who had guided Klaus and me through all the important contracts. When I explained what I planned, he grew very quiet. Petra, this is a drastic step. Your entire fortune? Are you sure your children deserve that? I showed him the folder. His expression grew serious as he flipped through the appraisals and brochures. I see, he said finally. I see. It's not just that they didn't visit me, I explained. It's that they already planned my life without asking me. They don't see me as their mother, but as an asset to be managed. And the nurse? I told him about Sarah, about her kindness, her attention, her genuine concern, about her brother, whom she supported through school even though she didn't have much herself. About the flowers she brought me, about the hand she held when I cried. She deserves it, I said simply. She showed me more love in 3 weeks than my own children in 3 years. Mr. Schneider nodded slowly. Then we'll do it that way. But Petra, are you ready for the consequences? Your children will not accept this quietly. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Mr. Schneider, I'm 65 years old, built a multi-million company, and spent 3 weeks alone in this hospital bed. I'm ready for anything. The new will was drafted that very day. My entire fortune, the 28 million euros from the sale of the company, the real estate, the savings, everything, was to go to Sarah Hoffman. Not directly, but through a foundation I wanted to establish. A foundation for the education and support of nurses and medical students. For Mark and Chloe, I set aside 500,000 euros each. Enough not to be penniless, but a fraction of what they expected. The will explicitly stated that this was their full inheritance. But before I died, and I hoped that would be many years away, I wanted to teach them one final lesson. I wanted them to understand what they had lost and why. A week later, I was discharged from the hospital. Sarah was there to say goodbye. She hugged me, and I whispered in her ear, "You are a special person, Sarah. Never forget that." Back home, I began to craft my plan. The first step was to appear normal. I called both children, told them I was feeling better, that the doctors were pleased. I didn't mention the folder. Mark came by on the weekend. Finally. He looked relieved to see me in familiar surroundings. "Thank God," he said. "You look like the old mom again." "Yes," I said. "The hospital was a hard time, but it also gave me a lot of time to think. About what? About the future. About the company. About my estate. His eyes instantly took on a different look. More alert, more interested. Oh? I'm thinking of selling the company, I said casually. I'm getting old, Mark. The heart attack was a warning shot. Maybe it's time to slow down. That's understandable, he said carefully. Do you already have concrete plans? Not yet, but I want both of you well provided for. You and Chloe are my most important legacy. He smiled genuinely for the first time that day. That's nice to hear, Mom. Chloe came the next day. I told her the same, and she too reacted with barely concealed relief. Both began to call more often, to stop by more. Suddenly I was interesting to them again. 2 months later, it was time for the next step. The annual summer gala of the Munich Catering Association, an event Klaus and I had organized for decades. This year it would be my farewell performance. I invited both children. It would be nice if you were there, I said. After all, it's your legacy being celebrated too. The gala took place at the Hotel Wir Jahreszeiten. All the important people in the industry were there. Hotel owners, restaurateurs, other caterers. I wore my finest dress, a dark blue ensemble that Klaus had always loved and felt stronger than I had in months. Mark and Chloe arrived together, both looking elegant and businesslike. They proudly introduced me to their acquaintances, talked about Mom's successful company and her impressive life's work. Suddenly, they were the loving children they had always pretended to be in public. During dinner, I gave a speech. I spoke about the beginnings, about Klaus, about the hard work of past decades. Then came the decisive moment. These past months, I said, looking directly at my children, have shown me what truly matters in life. Not success, not money, but the people who are there when you need them. The people who don't see you as an asset to be managed, but as a person who wants to be loved. It was a subtle message, but they understood. I saw Mark and Chloe exchange uneasy glances. That's why, I continued, I've decided that it's time for changes. Big changes. After the speech, many people came to congratulate me on my words. But I watched my children. They had grown nervous, whispering to each other. At the end of the evening, Mark came to me. Mom, what did you mean by big changes? Patience, I said with a smile. Everything in its time. In the weeks that followed, I invited them separately to lunch. Mark first. We met at his favorite restaurant, an expensive Italian place on Maximilianstrasse. Mark, I said after we ordered, I worry about your future. Why? The firm is doing well. Sabine and I are happy. But you're dependent on others. On the partners, on the clients. Wouldn't it be nice to be independent? To have your own firm? His eyes lit up. That would be a dream. But the startup costs, what would you need? He thought. At least $500,000. For offices, equipment, the first employees. Then I'll give you $500,000, I said plainly. Mark nearly choked on his wine. What? €500,000. An advance on your inheritance, so you can start your own firm. Mom, that's incredibly generous. There's only one condition. Which one? You can't tell Chloe, not yet. I have plans for her too, but I don't want her thinking she's being shortchanged. Mark didn't hesitate for a second. Of course, our secret. A week later, I played the same game with Chloe. We met at Café Luitpold, her favorite cafe since childhood. Chloe, sweetheart, I said, you work so hard at that ad agency, but honestly, you have what it takes for your own firm. You think so? She asked, and I could hear the longing in her voice. I know it. You're creative, intelligent, ambitious. All you need is seed capital. The conversation went exactly like with Mark. €500,000 as an advance on her inheritance on the condition that she tell her brother nothing about it. She agreed at once. Both signed the contracts without reading the fine print. It said this was their entire inheritance, paid out during my lifetime. But they didn't notice. They saw only the $500,000, and their dreams suddenly within reach. I carried out the third part of my plan with Sarah. I had invited her to dinner at Tantris, one of the best restaurants in Munich. She arrived in a simple black dress, visibly nervous. "Mrs. Muller, this is too fancy for me," she said. "Nonsense," I said. "You spent every evening with me when I was in the hospital. This is the least I can do for you." Over dinner, I learned her whole story. Sarah was from a small town near Nuremberg, had lost her parents early, and had taken care of her younger brother. She studied nursing, though she actually wanted to study medicine because there wasn't enough money. Her brother Tim was now in his 6th semester of medical school, but the costs were enormous. "I work extra shifts," she told me. "Tim shouldn't have the same problems I had. He should be able to fulfill his dream." "And what about your dreams?" She smiled sadly. "Sometimes you have to put your own dreams on the back burner so others can realize theirs." In that moment, I knew for sure I had made the right decision. This young woman, who had hardly any money, sacrificed everything for her brother. My own children, raised in comfort, couldn't be there for 3 weeks for their sick mother. "Sarah," I said, "what would you say if I offered to pay for Tim's studies completely?" She stared at me. I can't accept that. "It would be through my foundation. Anonymous. A scholarship for talented medical students from poor backgrounds." Tears ran down her cheeks. "Why would you do that for us?" "Because you showed me what family truly means." A year passed. Mark had opened his own law firm and was very successful. Chloe had founded her ad agency and was already winning her first major clients. Both called me regularly to tell me about their successes and to say thank you. Sarah had organized the scholarship for Tim, and he was able to focus fully on his studies. She herself had begun studying medicine part-time, a dream she had long given up. Then came the day I had worked toward for a year. My 66th birthday, I invited all the important people in my life to a celebration. Mark and Chloe came, of course, beaming and full of plans for the future. They had no idea what awaited them. "Before we really celebrate," I said after the main course, "I have an announcement to make. As you know, I've been thinking for a long time about my estate, about the future of my assets when I'm no longer here." Mark and Chloe exchanged expectant looks. "That's why," I continued, "I've decided to make my will public while I'm still alive, so everyone knows what their future holds." I nodded to Mr. Schneider, who stood in the corner and stepped forward. "Petra Müller," he began in his clear lawyer's voice. "Will dated March 23, 2024. Last amendment November 15, 2024. Mark and Chloe leaned forward, expectant. "I, Petra Müller, hereby dispose of my entire estate as follows. First, to my children Mark and Chloe Müller I bequeath $500,000 each, which has already been paid out during my lifetime and constitutes their full inheritance." The silence in the room was deafening. I watched the blood drain from Mark's face, saw Chloe's mouth fall open in shock. "Second," Mr. Schneider continued coolly, "I bequeath my remaining assets in the amount of approximately $27.5 million to the Sarah Klaus Müller Foundation, which shall support the education and advancement of nursing staff and medical students. Trustee and primary beneficiary of this foundation is Ms. Sarah Hoffman." "This is a joke," Mark burst out. "Mom, this is a bad joke, right?" I stood, my voice calm and firm. "It's not a joke, Mark. It's justice." "Justice?" Chloe screamed. "We're your children. This stranger gets our inheritance?" "Your stranger?" I repeated coldly. "Sarah became closer to me in 3 weeks than you did in 3 years. She held my hand when I was afraid I might die. You collected brochures for nursing homes." Mark jumped up. "You found the folder." "Of course I found it." You packed it into my bag when you visited me in the hospital. Your only visit in 3 weeks, which lasted a grand total of 20 minutes. Mom, that was just precaution, Chloe stammered. We only wanted to make sure you were well cared for. Well cared for? I laughed bitterly. You wanted to stick me in a home and sell my house. Without asking me, in secret. You decided my life as if I were already dead. Sarah, who had stood quietly in a corner the whole time, stepped forward. Mrs. Miller, I can't accept this. It's too much. Your family? You are my family, I said, taking her hand. Family isn't the people who share your blood. Family is the people who are there when it counts. Mark turned red with rage. You can't give everything to a total stranger. We'll contest this. On what grounds? Mr. Schneider asked calmly. The will is valid. Mrs. Muller was fully competent at the time of signing and even had medical certificates to that effect. She manipulated us. Chloe cried. The money she gave us was a trap. A trap? I repeated. I gave you €500,000 so you could pursue your dreams. No conditions, no interest. The only thing I asked for was secrecy toward the other. You both agreed immediately, because we thought it was an advance. That's what you assumed. I never said it was an advance. In the contracts you both signed without properly reading, it clearly stated this was your full inheritance. Mark had tears in his eyes, but they were tears of anger, not grief. You betrayed us. I tested you, I said coldly. And you failed. Both of you. When I was in the hospital thinking I might die, you worried about your theater subscription and your client presentation. When I offered you money, you took it without asking if I could afford it, without regard for the other. Chloe began to sob. We're your children. We love you. Love? I repeated. Where was that love when I lay alone in that hospital bed? Where was it when you planned to put me in a home? Love shows itself in actions, not words. Sarah squeezed my hand. Mrs. Muller, please. Maybe we can find a solution. No, I said firmly. The decision is made. You two, I looked at Mark and Chloe, have already received your inheritance. €500,000 is more than most people earn in a lifetime. If you manage it wisely, it's enough for a comfortable life. But the company, Mark shouted, the firm you and Dad built, will be sold. The proceeds will go into the foundation. The company will live on, but it will help people who truly need help. Mark and Chloe stood. We won't accept this, Mark said coldly. We'll hire every lawyer in Munich. That's your right, I replied evenly. But don't waste your money. Mr. Schneider made the will watertight. There is nothing to contest. They left the celebration without another word, without a goodbye kiss, without a last backward glance. The door slammed loudly, and the silence that followed was almost tangible. Sarah wept quietly. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I never wanted your family to break apart. The family was already broken, I said gently. I just stopped pretending it was whole. The guests who had witnessed this dramatic scene gradually left the party. Some shook my hand and murmured words of sympathy or admiration. Others cast condemning looks. I didn't care. When we were alone, Sarah, Mr. Schneider, and I sank, exhausted, onto the sofa. Do you regret it? Mr. Schneider asked. I thought a long time before answering. I regret that it came to this. I regret that my children didn't become the people I thought I had raised. But the decision? No, I don't regret it. Sarah sat beside me. What happens now? Now, I said, smiling for the first time that evening, we build something new, something better. In the months that followed, my life changed fundamentally. Mark and Chloe did try to contest the will. They hired one of Munich's most expensive law firms, waging a bitter legal battle that lasted over a year. But Mr. Schneider had been right. There was nothing to contest. The lawsuit cost them almost their entire $500,000 each. In the end, they stood with empty hands and enormous legal fees. The irony was bitter. Had they taken the money and built their businesses, they would be wealthy today. Instead, their greed and pride ruined them. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Mark had to close his firm. He now works again as an employed attorney, earning a fraction of what he used to. Chloe had to give up her agency and now freelances as a graphic designer. Neither has said a word to me since the court case. Sometimes I feel sorry, not for the decision, but for the pain. Because despite everything they had done, they were my children. I bore them, raised them, loved them. But love alone isn't enough when character is missing. Sarah, on the other hand, blossomed. The foundation was officially established, and she took over the leadership with a dedication that impressed me anew every day. Her brother Tim graduated with honors and now works as a resident at the Charité in Berlin. The foundation supported him in starting a research project on heart disease, a sweet irony, considering it all began with my heart attack. Sarah herself continued her medical studies part-time and eventually became a physician. Today she heads a small clinic for disadvantaged families, fully financed by the foundation. She married a wonderful man, a pediatrician named Michael, and last year they had their first child. When she showed me her son for the first time, a little red-faced boy with the same brown eyes as his mother, she named him Klaus Hoffmann Weber. After my late husband, he should know, she said with tears in her eyes, who made his life possible. Today, 3 years after that memorable birthday, I am 69 years old and happier than ever. I no longer live in the big house in Grünwald. It was sold, and the proceeds flow into the foundation. Instead, I moved into a small but fine apartment in Schwabing, only 10 minutes from Sarah's clinic. I am honorary president of the foundation and regularly visit the students we support. Their gratitude, their dreams, their hopes remind me every day that I made the right decision. Sarah and Michael visit me every Sunday for lunch. Little Klaus now crawls around my apartment and calls me Grandma Petra. It's the first time in years someone has called me Grandma. If you think this story has a sad ending, you're mistaken. It isn't a sad ending, it's a new beginning, because I learned that family has nothing to do with blood, but with love, respect, and the willingness to be there for each other. If you've listened this far, then you already know what matters in life. It's not the people who claim they love you, but the ones who prove it every day. It's not those who expect your inheritance, but those who cherish your presence. Sometimes you have to tear down old bridges so new ones can be built. Sometimes you have to let people go so the right people have room to stay. My children received their inheritance, not the money they expected, but the lesson they needed. Whether they learn from it is no longer in my hands. Sarah, on the other hand, inherited not just money, but responsibility, possibilities, and the chance to change other people's lives. And she does that every day. A few weeks ago, a journalist writing about the foundation asked me if I regret my decision. I told him the same thing I'm telling you. I regret nothing, not a single decision, because at the end of my life, I will not regret that I gave away too little money. I would regret if I had loved too little, done too little good, helped too few people. Mark and Chloe had their chance. Not just one, many. They could have visited me in the hospital. They could have spoken honestly with me about their worries. They could have used the money I gave them to succeed instead of wasting it on a pointless legal battle. But they chose differently. They chose greed over love, self-interest over family, bitterness over acceptance. Sarah chose differently. She chose, day after day, kindness, dedication, true love. And that's why she deserves everything she received. If you're wondering whether my story is true, it's truer than you might think. Not all of us inherit millions, but each of us makes daily choices about what kind of person we want to be. Each of us decides whether to be there for others or only for ourselves. The most valuable lesson I've learned in my 69 years is this: in the end, it's not what we got that counts, but what we gave. Not what others did for us, but what we did for others. When you go home today, call your parents. Not because you want something, but because you want to show them they matter to you. Visit your grandparents, text your siblings, hug your children. And if you have people in your life who only notice you when they want something, be brave enough to let them go. Make room for the people who love you for who you are. My story is over, but yours is just beginning. Choose wisely, love truly, and never forget, family is who's there when it counts. Thank you for listening. Thank you for becoming part of this journey. And remember, life is too short for fake people and too precious for real love. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect on your own relationships, then share it. Not for me, but for all the people out there who feel lonely right now, who wonder if they matter to their loved ones, who need courage to make hard decisions. Live well. Love truly. And never stop believing that every day is a new chance to make the right choice. This is my story. This is my truth. This is my legacy. And Sarah has become my greatest investment. Not because she got my money, but because she earned my love. She is proof there are still people who do the right thing, not because they have to, but because they want to. In a world full of Marks and Chloes, Sarah is a gift. And I'm grateful that I found her, or that she found me, in that sterile hospital room when I needed her most. That is the true inheritance. Not money or property, but the people we love and the love we pass on. Everything else is just paper and numbers. My children squandered their inheritance before they even knew they had it. Sarah earned hers every day through her kindness, her dedication, her genuine human warmth. Who got more in the end? You already know the answer. If you're still wondering whether I made the right decision, come visit me. Come to our clinic and see what Sarah has made of her inheritance. See the faces of the people being helped, the students given a chance, the families no longer alone. Then you'll understand. It wasn't just the right decision. It was the only possible decision, because in the end, it's not about who shares your blood. It's about who shares your heart. And Sarah has shared my heart from the first day she held my hand and showed me I wasn't alone. That is true family. That is true love. That is the true inheritance. And for that, I'm grateful every single day.